Emergent relations and generative learning. The important for me or important for you scenario, presented by Eddie Gomez, Aaron Hewitt, Grant Kehoe, Lacey Polizzi, Ariana Nasseri, and Victoria Zhao. Sarah is a 3-year-old who just transferred to a new school. Sarah's parents told the new teacher that Sarah has a language delay, which makes it difficult for her to communicate and express herself. Sarah becomes frustrated when this occurs and expresses disruptive behavior that includes ripping dress up clothes and crying. The teacher has tried using timeout to change Sarah's behavior, but it did not help. A board certified behavior analyst was called in to make an assessment and help improve Sarah's behavior.
Okay, so the first thing we are going to do is we're going to go over some terms that are important to this case. So motivated operation. Motivated operation is a environmental factor that temporarily affects the value or effectiveness of a reinforcer. An EO, which is connected to that, increases the value of a reinforcer and triggers behaviors aimed at obtaining food and stuff like that. And you have an abolishing operation, also known as an AO, which is stuff like deprivation and punishment and things of that nature. And then you have a conditioned motivation operation, which is something that is conditioned or unlearned, untrained, and then conditioned, which is, conditioned, which is actually taught. Next slide. And this is just a little slide, representation of all of it. Also, CMRO, CMOS, and CMOT, which are all reflexive, symmetric, and the other one. Next slide. And for Sarah's case, the removal of the toy makes the toy more reinforcing. It's acting as an EO, and the teacher walking away and not following through is acting as an AO, and leaving her alone and ignoring her in the end increases the likelihood of the behavior occurring in the future. And that's pretty clear in this scenario. Next slide.
Okay, thank you. For this slide, we'll focus on the motivating operation states that are really driving Sarah's behavior. A big factor is she's having trouble expressing what she wants and needs. When that happens, the motivation to escape situation goes up significantly. Using visual supports helps her understand what's going on, which lowers the value of escape and reduces the likelihood of tantrums. Another motivating operation state is how unpredictable transitions feel for her. When she doesn't know what's coming next, the motivation to escape increases. Visual tools like first and then boards make things clear and reduce that stress. We can also increase the value of communication by building in natural moments for her to request help or access. And because her peer interactions are difficult for her, visual social scripts give her a simple way to join play without getting overwhelmed. Next slide, please. Now, this slide covers the applied and adds a few more strategies tied to Sarah's motivating operation states. When demands are placed without reinforcement, the motivation to escape increases, just like on the other slide, but this would be applied, right? So the first and then board would help by pairing the task with something she likes, which would then lower the value of escape. Another MO state is that punishment tends to increase avoidance. When we shift to reinforcement, we give Sarah a functional alternative that actually meets her needs. Predictable routines also help because they can make communication the easiest way for her to get clarity and support. And finally, unclear transitions can make escape more appealing. A visual schedule reduces that uncertainty and helps prevent transition-related meltdowns. Now that we've looked at how manipulating motivation operations can reduce escape-maintained behaviors and increase communication for Sarah, I'll hand it over to the next presenter to walk us through the contingency-based strategies that build upon these foundations. Next.
So this behavior is classified as a contingency-shaped operant because Sarah's behavior has been learned through direct contact with the environmental consequences. There are 5 core behavioral contingencies, which are positive and negative reinforcement, positive and negative punishment, and extinction. In this case, the primary maintaining contingencies appear to be negative reinforcement through escape and positive reinforcement through attention. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. To address Sarah's behavior, there are 4 intervention strategies. For positive reinforcement, a star card token system can be used. For negative reinforcement, functional communication training, or FCT, teaches Sarah to request a break appropriately by using a break card. For positive punishment, if Sarah throws materials or damages classroom items, she is required to restore the environment. For negative punishment, a request cost procedure can be implemented. And it is important to note that punishment procedures should never be used alone. Consistent with BACB ethical guidelines, reinforcement-based interventions should be prioritized, and punishment should only be used as a low intrusion support while replacement communication skills are being taught. Next, please.
Okay, we're going to continue with verbal behavior. So according to Skinner, he offered 6 verbal operands, and these function as units to demonstrate distinct communicative purpose and are driven by different environmental triggers and rewards, also known as antecedents and consequences. So here we've listed all 6 of those operands according to Skinner. And in this case, the manned operant and the interverbal operant are what are reflected. So Skinner viewed each operant as a physical behavior driven by its purpose or function, aligning with the goals of ABA. In this case study, we see that Sarah exhibits a deficit with requesting to play with her peers, and subsequently, she is unable to maintain ongoing conversation with her peers. So in this diagram, we see that broken down as we teach verbal behavior. So Sarah wants to play with Aiden and Noah. The MO is present. She wants to play dress up with her peers, and there's also a visual stimulus of seeing her peers playing. The behavior will then be Sarah asking to play with her peers, and reinforcement is shown as her peers agreeing to play with her, and they play together through the manned operant. So in the man operant, we see that this lacks point-to-point correspondence and formal similarity, which we refer to as thematic control. The second operant that is reflected in this study is the interverbal operant, and this is where Sarah wants to engage in conversation with her peers. So the goal is for her to be able to engage. The antecedent is shown as one of her peers asking a question, and the behavior would be Sarah being able to respond. And then the reinforcement would be ongoing conversation with her peers. So convergent control and divergent control are both represented in their corresponding verbal operands. Within the manned operant, an MO and a visual stimulus are both present. And in the interverbal operant, only a verbal stimulus is present. In regards to reinforcement, so to strengthen Sarah's verbal behavior, we would apply differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. And this would be most effective on a continuous reinforcement schedule due to her frequent tantruming, crying, and aggressive behaviors. Through functional communication training, Sarah would be reinforced for all appropriate mands, and any tantrum or aggressive behaviors would be ignored and reinforcement would be withheld. When every correct response is reinforced, this schedule makes the connection between the behavior and its positive outcome for Sarah. So over time, the behaviors will increase and the reinforcement schedule will then be faded by being implemented intermittently.
Stimulus equivalence refers to the development of untrained connections between stimuli that have never been directly reinforced. It is defined by 3 core properties. Reflexivity is the ability to match identical stimuli to themselves. A equals A. For Sarah, this breaks down when she fails to recognize that a spoken word for an object or its picture or the object itself all refer to the same referent. Without reflexivity established across these stimulus forms, every new context presents a new, unrelated demand. which explains why she becomes frustrated and dysregulated so quickly when situational demands shift. Symmetry means that if a learner is taught that A relates to B, then the reverse relation B to A emerges without direct reinforcement. Sarah may understand spoken instructions A to B, but cannot spontaneously generate a verbal response in return. This asymmetry between receptive and expressive language is exactly why Rachel identified Manding as a critical target. Without a strong manned repertoire, Sarah may not initiate communication, leaving her unable to express her wants, needs, or distress verbally. Transitivity is the ability to match two stimuli based on their mutual relationship with a third. If A equals B, if A is similar to B and B is similar to C, then A is similar to C. For Sarah, she may know that dress up relates to dress up area and the dress up area relates to peer play, yet she cannot derive that dress up connects to joining peer play. Each piece of the social context existed in isolation, leaving her behaviorally stranded and escalating into crying and property destruction. Together, these principles are foundational to language and cognition. Without stimulus equivalence, every word, picture, and object would require its own direct training. Instead, once relations are established within a class, meanings generalize across contexts. Mutual entailment allows meaning to reverse without direct instruction. So words and the objects they represent become interchangeable. Combinatorial entailment allows entirely novel relations to emerge across stimulus networks, which is how learners comprehend sentences they have never heard before. And through transformation of stimulus function, the psychological properties of one stimulus transfer to every member of its class, which is how perspective taking, emotional understanding, and social meaning develop through the same derived relational processes. This is precisely why rebuilding Sarah's relational network is not just a behavioral goal, but a language and cognitive one. Next slide, please.
Rachel's ABC data suggests that Sarah's outbursts are maintained by escape from demands. When demands are presented, Sarah often engages in problem behavior and is allowed to avoid the task, making the demands an SD for tantrums and aggression. To transfer stimulus control, we would want to implement functional communication training to teach Sarah to point to a break card. Differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors would be used by reinforcing the break card with a brief break, but by not reinforcing by no longer allowing her to escape. Prompts would be faded from physical guidance to gestures to visual cues and finally independent responding. And the goal is for the teacher demands to evoke communication rather than problem behaviors in the future. Next slide, please. In this case, to promote generalization, Sarah would practice using the break card during multiple classroom activities. For example, cleanup, art, peer play, and transition, so that she's practicing this skill across multiple settings. Also, multiple staff would also need to reinforce this behavior to ensure the skill transfers across multiple people as well. For maintenance, reinforcement would gradually be thinned while natural reinforcement would increase because of her functional communication she's able to have with her peers now. This intervention also uses stimulus equivalents. The break card, the pointing response, and the access to a break form a stimulus class. And through emergent relations and transformation of function, the break card acquires the reinforcing value of a break, making it more likely that Sarah will use the communication instead of engaging in the problem behavior in the future. Next slide, please.
In conclusion, Sarah's case is like many cases involving kids with autism, is complex, has a lot of pieces to it, but in this presentation, we tried to break it down into the terms and everything that is connected to the case, and following through with Skinner's entire mentality of trying to improve the quality of life, because that is the goal of ABA, and trying to find ways to improve Sarah's life and help it be more functional and decreasing her problem behaviors.
Okay, we'll go ahead and stop.
Thanks for watching.